Hello, students. Welcome to this another discussion video on the topic shareholders equity, specifically for treasury shares, rights issue, and share split. So I divided this particular video lecture into two. So part one will cover treasury shares, and part two will cover the recapitalization concerns for transactions, which includes rights issue and the share split. So before we move forward, let me give credits to Sir John Glenn Rioja, CPE, for the PowerPoint presentation. So thank you, sir, for allowing me to use this PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so let's start. So at the end of this lesson, you should be able to record treasury shares transactions properly, identify the typical recapitalizations, and measure the issuance of preference shares with share warrants. So again, for this particular video, we'll only focus on the first objective, which is to record treasury share transactions properly. So first things first, what is treasury share, or what are treasury shares? So treasury shares are an entity's own shares that have been issued and then reacquired but not canceled. So based on the definition, we can derive the characteristics of treasury shares as follows. So first, for it to be considered as a treasury share, it must be entity's own shares. So they acquired their own shares now, which was previously issued. Because if what they acquired is not their own share, so therefore it's not a treasury share, but rather an investment. Letter B, the shares must have been issued originally. So meaning this is already the second transaction, no? The shares were already issued before, and then you just decided, or the entity decided for some reason to reacquire them. Maybe one of the reasons would be they are very conscious as to the um, number of shares that are outstanding, so as to protect their ownership or control, no, over the corporation. So that could be one reason. So this requisite distinguishes treasury shares from the unissued shares, no? Because for unissued shares, take note that it is illegal for us to issue the shares originally lower than its par value or stated value. But for treasury shares, so take note that since these shares have been issued before, so if you are to them again, then um, you can reissue it at a price which could be lower than the par value. So it will not be a violation anymore of the law, no, the corporation code. So any discount, or again, no, it can be issued or reissued at a discount without any discount liability. Whereas again, unissued shares must be issued at least at par or at stated value. So another one is dapat the shares are reacquired but not canceled. So when you say canceled, ibig sabihin nito that you are going to recognize already the shares, no, or the share capital from your record. So which means that there's no chance anymore for you to reissue it, no, if you are to cancel the share. So treasury shares or shares originally issued and then reacquired but not yet, or but not canceled. So just take note of this one, no, that no corporation shall redeem, repurchases, or reacquire its own shares of whatever class unless it has adequate amount of unrestricted retained earnings to support the cost of the said shares. So this is in accordance with the trust fund doctrine. So take note of that, no, that every time there's a treasury share, there is a need for us to appropriate no an amount from our retained earnings, no, restrict it because there is a treasury share. No? So, the effect of the treasury share kasi is nakaka-reduce siya ng shareholders equity. So, dapat there is enough, no? Parang merong enough na retained earnings to back up no that particular reacquisition of shares. So as to protect, of course, no, the interest of the shareholders, no, or the investors of a certain company, considering that again, corporations or has or the shareholders no of a corporation has only limited liability. So just to protect some investors or creditors, um, no, to protect the creditors of the entity, so kailangan nating makapag-maintain no ng enough na funds no or equity for the protection of um the creditors no or any stakeholders for that matter. So let's proceed to the accounting for treasury shares. So actually we can divide no the transactions related to treasury share into two. One is the reacquisition. So meaning this is the time when you repurchase the treasury shares after you have originally issued it, no? So outstanding na siya, na-issue mo na, and then now you or the corporation has decided to reacquire the shares, no? So ito. So yung concern natin sa reacquisition is of course at what amount should you record the treasury shares. So according to our accounting standards, no, the measurement of treasury share is at cost. So meaning whatever consideration you have given, that's the amount to be debited as the cost no or the measurement of your treasury share. So of course it will depend on what type of consideration na that the corporation has given up. So kasi it could be, no, usually it is cash, but there are also times wherein ang ibabayad, no, na ang ibabayad is or ang i-give up ng corporation is a non-cash item. So if that's the case, no, pag cash, then wala tayong masyadong problem kasi kung magkano yung binayad mo sa no to acquire the treasury share will just be the amount, the same amount that you're going to debit as your treasury share. However, kapag non-cash naman, like for example, ang binayad, no, ang ginamit na pambayad ni corporation is for example, land. So take note that the treasury share, no, will be debited at the cost or at cost or carrying amount of that particular non-cash item. So for example, kung land yan, say in the book value of the corporation, land is recognized at 1 million. So meaning treasury shares will be debited at 1 million and then you have to credit land for 1 million also. So you have to consider the carrying amount or the book value of the item that you're going to give up. So again, take note if that is a reacquisition and if it is a non-cash consideration, ang ibabayad, then we make reference to the carrying amount or the book value of the non-cash consideration given up no, as our measure no, ng cost sa treasury shares natin. Okay, so in this particular transaction, this will be the pro forma entry. So you are just to debit the treasury shares at cost, and then you just credit cash again at face value and non-cash asset no, at its carrying amount. So take note that, for example, if this is an equipment, so since equipment has accumulated depreciation, no, all of the related accounts no pertaining to that non-cash asset na i-give up or ibibigay no ibabayad should also be the recognized from the records. Like for example, again, if you are giving up equipment with a cost of 100,000 and an accumulated depreciation of 30,000. So it has a net book value of 70,000. So ibig sabihin, treasury share should be debited at 70,000, the carrying amount or the book value of the equipment. And then you are going to debit also the accumulated depreciation amounting to 30,000. And then you credit equipment at 100,000. Now, because of course, all of the um, items, no, all of the accounts related to the equipment should also be recognized. No? You have to clear your books from all of those items or all of those um, accounts, no, which are related to the item that you are giving up, no, or you give up as consideration in reacquiring the treasury share. We have here an illustration, no, for accounting for treasury share pertinent to the reacquisition. So for example, here, the entity acquired 2,000 shares with a par value of 100 at 150 per share. So in short, the reissue price is 150 per share. So you multiply that at 2,000. So that will be 300,000. So you just debit treasury shares at 300,000 and credit cash for 300,000. Now, let's proceed to reissuance. No? So this one is original acquisition, or meaning the reacquisition. Then the second is on reissuance. So ibig sabihin nun, na-acquire na natin yung treasury share, but since 'di ba nga treasury shares are not yet canceled, so anytime you can just reissue them, no? So pwede mong ibenta ulit. Now, our concern kapag reissue tayo is depende, no, yung consideration na ma-receive natin because of the reissuance of the treasury share. The reissuance price could be at cost, it could be above cost, or it could also be below cost. So let's try to account, no? Ano yung treatment natin pag at cost lang siya. So this is the example, no? This is based on our illustration kanina. So what if we reacquired the treasury shares at 150 per share? So say for example, if you reissued it at the same amount, 150, so meaning you reissued it at cost, then you'll be receiving 150 times 2,000. So you'll be receiving 300,000. So what you're going to do is you just debit your cash and then credit your treasury shares at cost. Okay. Now, what if the um, reissuance price is above the cost? No? So again, here in our example, the cost is 150 per share. So what if the corporation is able to sell it or able to reissue it at 200 per share? So what will be our entry? So of course, we'll be receiving cash amounting to 400,000. So that will be your 2,000 treasury shares times the 200 reissue price. So you have 400,000 as your debit because that's the amount that you receive. And then you credit treasury shares at cost. So again, the cost here is 150 times 2,000. So you'll have 300,000. And then yung sobra na parang gain natin, no? Parang gain natin amounting to 50 pesos per share. So that's equivalent to 100,000. So para siyang gain, but again, because this is an equity transaction, we do not recognize gain or loss, no, items which will be reported in our profit or loss statement. But it will be credited lang to an equity item, no, which is, in this case, the share premium treasury. So what if below cost naman, no? So what if the reissuance price is below cost? So if it is below cost, like for example, in this case, the acquisition cost, the reacquisition cost was 150, pero when you resell it, no, when you reissued the treasury shares, you're able to sell it at 100 lang. So meaning you will be receiving 2,000 times 100 pesos. So that's 200,000. And of course, you are to credit treasury shares at 300,000. So it would appear that meron tayong parang loss amounting to 50 pesos per share or 100,000 no, in total. So what are we going to do with that 100,000 parang loss, no, because of the reissuance of the treasury share? So in order of priority, you're going to charge it first to your share premium treasury share if ever meron. Tapos, pag na-exhaust na yung share premium ng treasury share, you're going to charge it the retained earnings. So, in this case, in this illustration, no, we are assuming that walang balanse ang share premium treasury share, and that is why we just debit everything to retained earnings. Okay? So, just to emphasize, no, so if ever you are going to reissue your treasury share, no, the reissuance could result either to a gain, a loss, or no gain or loss. No? So again, here, quote unquote, gain and loss are not actually the gain or loss which are reportable to your profit or loss or your income statement because this is an equity item. So itong mga gain or loss natin will be recognized, will be reported also within the equity section. So for example, pag meron tayong gain from reissuance, just like that happened in our first na illustration, no? What if above cost yung reissue price niya, so meron kang capital gain. So it shall be credited to share premium treasury shares. Pag lugi naman, like for example, kulang ang, or meaning the reissuance price is lower than the reacquisition cost ng treasury share, then somehow meron kang loss, no? So yung loss na yun from reissuance or yung capital loss mo na yun, you are going to debit it, again, in order of priority, first, no, to the share premium treasury shares account if may balanse. And if ever hindi enough or walang balanse ang share premium treasury shares, then charge natin siya to retained earnings. So we have here an illustration to account for treasury shares. So we are given portion, no, or part, or I think this is a shareholders equity section of the statement of financial position. So we're given the number, the ordinary share capital issued niya is 10,000 at 100 par. So that's equivalent to 1 million pesos. And then we have the share premium original issuance of 200,000. So ibig sabihin, when this 10,000 shares were originally issued, they were sold, no, at an amount higher than its par value since there is a reported share premium ng original issuance. As to the treasury shares, no, share premium treasury shares, meron din siyang balance, 20,000. Tapos retained earnings niya is 500,000. Now there is a treasury share, 2,000 shares at cost. So that's 300,000. So ibig sabihin, the reacquisition cost was 300,000 divided 2,000. So most probably that's 150 pesos per share, no, yung pag reacquire niyo ng treasury. Now, what if the reissue price, no, is 100 lang per share? So 100 per share lang, ibig sabihin kulang, no, short. Mas malaki ang cost natin compared to the reissue price, no, or the reissuance price. So may difference na 50 pesos per share, no? Kasi 150 versus 100 per share na reissue price. So there is again discrepancy or parang loss, no, na 50 pesos per share. So how do we account for that? No? So una, of course, you have to recognize the amount of cash that you'll be receiving from your from the from the shareholder, yung interested to buy, no, the treasury shares. So in this case, meron tayong 100 pesos times 2,000, so that's 200,000. So makaka-receive tayo ng 200,000. So itong treasury shares na to, since lahat naman ng 2,000 na treasury share ay issue niya. So, ibig sabihin, all of this 300,000 should be credited. So, yan, nag-credit tayo ng treasury shares sa 300,000. So, parang meron tayong lugi, no, amounting to 100,000. So, the question is, saan natin i-charge yung 100,000 na parang lugi, no, yung capital loss natin? So, again, according to the concept, unahin natin yung treasury or yung share premium treasury share. In this case, meron siyang balance na 20,000. So, you just charge it first. No? The 100,000 will be charged first to your share premium treasury shares. And then yung sobra will be debited to your retained earnings. Okay? So, this will be your entry to recognize the reissuance of your share or your treasury shares at 100 per share. No? Another thing that you have to consider, no, on the reissuance na transaction is ito, no. The main concern on reissuance would be the gain or loss on reissuance of treasury shares. So again, the term gain or loss here are equity items, no, will not be reflected in our profit or loss statement. Pero it's just really good to know kung paano nga ba i-establish yung gain or loss from reissuance, no? Kasi we already um have covered kung how do we account for the gain or loss. So this time, how much will be considered as gain or loss from the reissuance? So this is the basic formula when we compute for the gain or loss from gain or loss, no, any given asset. So you establish first the selling price. Then next is you establish the cost of the treasury shares, or in this time you establish the cost so that you'll be able to compute for the gain or loss, no? In this case, the reissuance. Okay? So, yung selling price natin, magdedepende yan, no? Selling price or issue price natin could be in the form of cash or in the form of non-cash consideration, no? So let me um move to the next slide. So ito, no, yung selling price na sinatabi natin, it will, no, the amount that you're going to assign to that selling price will depend on the consideration that you will receive, no, from the issuance of shares or treasury shares. Kasi yung consideration na ma-receive natin from the reissuance could either be cash or non-cash. So take note dito, we are reissuing na. So, makaka-receive tayo ng cash or non-cash. So, kapag cash, walang problema because you are to debit it to face value. But if it is a non-cash, take note, no, makaka-receive tayo ng non-cash na item. So, usually, pag non-cash item nung natatanggap natin or natanggap natin, we recognize that non-cash consideration at fair value. No? So, again, kapag tayo ang nagbenta, tapos naka-receive tayo ng non-cash consideration, we measure that non-cash consideration at fair value. So, I hope, I would just like to point out, no, na kanina tayo ang nag-reacquire. So, ibig sabihin tayo yung magbabayad, no? Para to reacquire the treasury shares. So this time, tayo naman ang makakatanggap kasi after reacquiring, we have decided now to reissue the treasury shares. So therefore, meron tayong ika-cash out, for example, kung cash man yan, or i-give up, no, na non-cash consideration. So again, kung tayo yung magre-reacquire. So, ulitin ko lang, in this case, tayo yung makakatanggap, no, ng consideration, makakatanggap kasi tayo yung magbebenta. Magbebenta tayo ng or ibebenta natin ulit yung treasury share. So pag ibenta natin ulit ang treasury share, again, it's either you'll be receiving cash or you'll be receiving non-cash consideration. So pag cash, walang problema at face value. Pero pag non-cash, you have to make reference to the fair value of the non-cash consideration. So, next would be the cost, no? So, na-establish na natin yung selling price. Now, or the reissuance price, no? Now, how much will be the cost to be assigned to treasury shares, no? It will depend on the method used in accounting for the movement of treasury shares. And we have here different methods. One is the specific identification. So pag sinabi natin specific identification, ibig sabihin class that you really identify or point out kung ano yung like for example, no, you have purchased several treasury shares on different dates. So pag specific identification, you really have to identify, parang i-vouch mo, i-monitor mo kung ito bang binenta ko ulit na treasury shares, saan ba galing ito na reacquisition? So that you will know kung magkano yung cost pag reacquire mo. No, you can match it with the selling price na meron ka na ngayon to establish the gain or loss. Second method would be the first in, first out. So if the problem is silent, as the method used in assigning the value, then FIFO shall be used. So ibig sabihin yung earliest no na treasury shares na in-acquire mo would also be the parang yung pinakauna mong i-reissue. No, that's FIFO. First in, then first out. So the treasury shares sold will be coming from the earliest acquisition. Then the last one would be the weighted average. So here, the value of the treasury shares is equal at the point of view that the cost to be used will be the weighted average amount. No? So dito, you have to compute for a weighted average cost no, per share. And how much would that be? That is the total amount of your treasury shares available for sale or for issuance in peso value or in peso amount divided by the number of treasury shares available for sale or for reissuance. No? So para makuha natin yung weighted average cost per share natin, yun yung gagamitin natin pang multiply na kung magkano man ang treasury shares na ibebenta mo. Again, to establish the cost of the treasury share. Then we have here a retirement of treasury shares. No? So like for example, in case no na pinurchase mo yung shares, however, after holding it for some period, you have decided na di mo na siya ibebenta ulit, but you're going to retire the treasury shares. So kung i-retire natin ang treasury share, we have to establish then no yung kung meron bang gain or loss. So usually if the cost of the treasury share is less than the original issue price, then meron tayong gain on retirement. Which again, kasi nga equity ito, hindi natin i-report sa PN, profit or loss statement, kundi one of the equity items lang siya. Okay? So this will be the pro forma entry if you are going to retire your treasury share. No? Take note, pag-retirement na, kasi tanggalin na yung share capital. Like for example here, nag-debit na tayo ng share capital. This one is at par value. And then, i-debit din natin yung share premium sa original issuance, no? Yung sobra sa par value. Kasi nga, di ba, itong share premium na to, this is just a result of the original issuance. So, dapat tanggalin din natin siya if you're to retire also the related share capital. Then, we credit treasury shares at cost, kung magkano man yan. And then yung sobra, for sure may sobra yan kasi nga mas malaki or mas maliit ang cost ng treasury share compared sa original issuance. So, meron tayong somehow gain which will be credited to share premium treasury shares. So, that's how you retire your treasury share. If the cost of the treasury share is less than the original issue price. So, what is, this one is the illustration. No? So, what if yung 1,000 ordinary shares mo for value of 100 are held as treasury at cost. So the cost of treasury is 80,000 and then this was subsequently retired. So the journal entry would be, una, i-debit mo yung share capital natin at par value. Then you credit treasury shares at the cost, no, which is 80,000. So meron tayong sobra na 20,000. So dito, since the original issuance of the share was only at par value. So wala tayong i-debit na share premium na original issuance. So ito naman, what if the retirement of the treasury shares resulted to a capital loss? So kailan ito mangyayari? If the cost of the treasury shares is greater than the original issue price. So para tayong merong loss. So the capital loss is charged in order of priority. So first is to the related share premium or the share premium treasury, and the second is the retained earnings. So dito I'd like to point out, class, that um, before tayo mag-charge ng anything sa share premium treasury share, dapat na-exhaust na natin ang share premium from the original issuance of na related, no, doon sa mga share capital na i-retire mo or treasury share na i-retire mo, no? So just to um clear it out, no, para baka ma-confuse kayo bakit nag-debit muna, no, or nag-debit muna ng share premium na original issuance. Kasi nga kapag nag-retire tayo ng share, um, if you debit your share capital, you also debit the related share premium, no, from the original issuance, no, pertaining to that particular share capital. So after that, kung meron pa talagang sobra, no, somehow loss, you're going to charge it to share premium, treasury share, and then kung kulang pa, to retained earnings na. Okay, so ito, sample, pro forma entry. So you debit share premium, I'd rather, unahin na natin yung share capital, no, at par. Then, yung share premium, excess of par. So, in short, this is the share premium from the original issuance. Then, next would be the share premium treasury shares. And then, kung kulang pa, then retained earnings na. No? Then, we credit treasury shares at cost. Okay? So, meron tayo dito sample na illustration. So, what if the par value or stated value is less than the cost of the treasury? So, here, the par value is 100 pesos per share. 50,000 yung shares natin. So, you'll have 5 million. Then, the original issuance na share premium is 500,000. So, itong 500,000 na to, this is parang divided into the 50,000 shares na na-issue na. So, 50,000 shares, itong 500,000 na to is related to that 50,000 shares na na-issue niya originally. Then, meron tayong share premium na treasury, 100,000, retained earnings na 1 million, and treasury shares na 5,000 at a cost of 750,000. So, if you are to retire, no, this particular 5,000 treasury shares, so kung i-retire natin to, ibig sabihin, we have to debit the share capital at par value. So, that is 5,000 times 100. So, kaya meron tayong 500,000 dito. Tapos yung share premium original issuance, so paano na-compute yung 50,000? So, sabi natin, 500,000 na share premium original issuance here relates to the 50,000 shares. So, kung gusto natin i-retire ang 5,000 shares lang, ibig sabihin, prorate natin, no? Magkano sa 500,000 ang related sa 5,000 shares, no? So, that's 5,000 shares over 50,000 shares times 500,000. No, kasi this is 10%, so that's why it's 50,000 related sa 5,000 na shares. Pwede rin naman na 500,000 divide natin sa 50,000 shares. So, ibig sabihin, kinumpute natin kung magkano ba ang share premium sa original issuance per share. So, that's 500,000 divided by 50. So, you'll have 10. So, ibig sabihin, 10 pesos ang share premium sa original issuance, no, every share. So, that's 10 pesos times 5,000. So, it will give us 50,000, no, na share premium. So, yan yung i-debit natin. And then, meron pang kulang, di ba? Kasi yung cost ng treasury share is 750. So, you have to credit treasury shares here, 750,000. So, somehow, 550. So, meron pang kulang na, no, parang loss na 200,000. So, saan natin siya i-charge? tingnan natin, merong share premium treasury shares na 100,000. So, you have to charge first, no, the loss to this particular account. So, since kulang pa, charge mo na siya sa retained earnings na 100,000. Okay? So, proceed tayo sa mga disclosure requirements ng treasury shares. So, what are the things that you have to disclose, no, in relation to the treasury shares? So, first is the number of shares held in the treasury. Importante ito kasi treasury shares are deducted from the issued shares para makuha natin yung outstanding shares. Second, the restriction on the availability of retained earnings for the distribution of dividends equal to the cost of the treasury share. Kasi nga, sabi natin, kapag may treasury share, dapat merong appropriation sa retained earnings. Lastly, the cost of the treasury shares, no, shall be presented as a deduction from the total shareholders' equity. So, ito yung presentation ng treasury share. So, all amounts here are just assumed. So, it was just telling us that pag meron treasury share, you have to deduct it from the total shareholders' equity. So, example, ito yung ating section sa shareholders' equity. So, you have your share capital ordinary, your share premium, your retained earnings na your retained earnings na 600, your retained earnings nga 200,000 of which, no, 600,000 is appropriated for the treasury share. So, pwede mo rin i-present yung 600,000 separately as retained earnings appropriated. So, ang matitira na lang sa retained earnings is 1.4 million na lang. Then, lastly, you deduct the treasury shares at cost, which is 600,000. So, ito yung total shareholders equity natin. So, that's how you present treasury shares, no? You have to deduct it from the total shareholders equity. So, let's proceed to donation class. So, yung donation, no, ang corporation is makaka-receive ng donation. So, accounting for donation will depend on, una, anong form of donation? Is it cash? Is it non-cash? Is it entity's own share? Or, another thing to consider is, ano yung source? No? Sino yung nagbigay? Sino yung donee? Ay, sorry. Sino yung donor, no? Sino yung nag-donate, no? Yung donor. So, because that will matter in your measurement as well as your accounting for that donated capital, no? So, first is kapag cash, tapos galing sa third party or shareholder, then we are going to measure that at face amount. In terms of accounting, later, no, we'll point out kung anong gagawin kapag ang source or ang donor is a third party or shareholder. Non-cash naman, the source could be a third party or a shareholder. So pag non-cash asset yung na-receive natin as donation, you have to recognize it at fair value din. No? Pero pag entity's own share, so the source will be, of course, coming from the shareholder. How do we measure it? No? So not applicable because we did not prepare journal entry kapag merong donation. All you have to do is prepare a memorandum entry. So dito, no, if the donation came from a third party, then you have to credit it as other income. However, if the donation is coming from a related party or a shareholder, then the credit is donated capital. So upon the reissuance of donated shares or the treasury shares, the entry will be a debit to cash or non-cash asset and credit to donated capital. Next, we have assessment on shareholders' equity. So, ano yung assessment? So, assessment is parang i-impose natin sa mga shareholders. So, this assessment may be levied or on the shareholders when the shares are originally issued at a discount. So, that could be one case. So we have here an example. What if now there is a discount on share capital amounting to 100,000 and it was charged to the shareholder by virtue of an assessment made by the board of directors. So the entry would be a debit to cash or share assessment receivable if hindi natin natanggap pa, no? And credit discount on share capital. So what if, no, the corporation is in dire need of financial assistance, no? So this is also the possible reason why the corporation will levy on shareholders assessment kasi kulang sila ng funds. So example, that's the reason no, why merong assessment. So ang gagawin is what happened? Here, there is a discount on share capital of 100,000. Outstanding of the share, outstanding and the shareholders are assessed 50 pesos per share. So you just debit cash or share assessment receivable, 5 million, credit share premium assessment. So that will be 50 no, times the number of shares. So in this case, that's 5 million. So share premium assessment will be credited, no, if that's the case. Okay, so that's the end of part 1. I hope you learned something from this video. If you have questions, feel free to ask it during our face-to-face classes. Okay, so I'll see you in the next or the second part of this lecture. Bye.